You are watching two economies quietly bleed to death, and most people have no idea it is happening. On the night of April 13, 2024, Iran fired 170 drones, 120 ballistic missiles, and 30 cruise missiles at Israel in a single coordinated strike. It was the first direct Iranian military attack on Israeli soil in the nation's history, and it cost Iran approximately $80 million to launch an assault that was 99% intercepted before a single warhead reached its target. But here is what nobody is talking about. That one night was not the story. The story is what happened to both economies in the months surrounding it, and what is still happening now, quietly, in ways that do not make headlines but devastate ordinary people. By the time this video ends, you will understand why Iran's rial lost 30% of its value in a matter of weeks, why Israel received a credit downgrade for the first time in its 76-year history, and why the financial cost of this shadow war may ultimately cause more long-term damage than any missile ever could. This video is educational analysis of publicly available information. It is not a verdict on either government or its people. To understand how two nations arrived at this point, you have to go back further than April 2024. Iran was once, by regional standards, a functioning economic power. Before sanctions tightened after 2018, the rial traded at approximately 42,000 to the US dollar. Imperfect, yes. Pressured, yes. But recognizable as a currency with a future. Israel, meanwhile, built one of the most remarkable economic stories of the 20th century. A country with no oil, surrounded by adversaries that became a global technology hub. By the early 2020s, its credit rating sat at A2 with Moody's, the kind of rating that signals institutional confidence, access to cheap capital, and investor trust. Both of those foundations have since cracked. Not dramatically, not all at once, but consistently, measurably, and in ways that compound over time. The cracks in Iran's economy were visible long before April 2024. Years of compounding sanctions, capital flight, and monetary policy that critics described as increasingly difficult for outside observers to independently verify had steadily eroded purchasing power. Some economists who study the region noted publicly that ordinary Iranians were watching their savings lose meaning in real time, not because of foreign missiles, but because of what was happening inside their own banking system. Iran's rial collapsed to 700,000 per US dollar by mid-2024, down from $42,000 in 2018. That is not a typo. In roughly 6 years, the currency lost the equivalent of more than 90% of its exchange value against the dollar. For a family that saved 100 million rials in 2018, which represented real money, real sacrifice, that sum now buys what $14,000 once bought, then less than $2,000. In Israel, the warning signs took a different form. After the Hamas attack of October 7, 2023, Israel's defense spending surged to $27.5 billion in 2024, representing 8.3% of GDP. According to public economic data, that figure represented the highest military spending burden of any developed economy that year. To put that in context, NATO's benchmark for military spending is 2% of GDP. Israel was running at 4 times that rate. Every percentage point above baseline represents money not spent on hospitals, infrastructure, education, or the private sector investment that generates long-term growth. Then came the moment that changed the financial narrative permanently. In September 2024, Moody's downgraded Israel's credit rating from A2 to A3. The agency cited, in its own language, geopolitical risk. It was the first credit downgrade in Israel's 76-year history as a nation. A credit downgrade is not just a number changing on a spreadsheet. It is a signal to every pension fund, every sovereign wealth fund, every institutional investor on Earth that the risk calculation has shifted, and the effects were already visible before the rating changed. Between October 2023 and mid-2024, Israel's tourism industry lost an estimated $2.4 billion in revenue. More than 100,000 flights were cancelled across all major carriers operating to and from the country. Hotels emptied, restaurants closed. Guides who spent decades building businesses around incoming visitors watched those businesses disappear in a matter of months. $2.4 billion in tourism revenue. Lost, 100,000 flights cancelled in under a year. These are not abstract numbers. They represent salaries that were not paid, mortgages that fell behind, and small businesses that may never reopen. In Iran, the human cost runs deeper and has been accumulating longer. When a currency loses the scale of value that the rial has lost since 2018, it does not punish governments equally across the population. It punishes the people who cannot move their savings into dollars or gold. It punishes teachers, nurses, factory workers, and pensioners, people whose entire financial existence is denominated in the collapsing currency. Analysts who study sanctions economics have noted publicly that currency collapse of this magnitude tends to widen inequality sharply. Those with access to foreign currency or hard assets are partially shielded. Those without are not. No regulator has issued specific findings connecting Iran's currency collapse to deliberate government policy, but independent economists have raised questions in public reporting about the transparency of Iran's monetary management. Here is what this means for you today. Shadow wars have shadow costs. The missiles are visible, the satellite images are dramatic, the interception percentages make good television. But the quiet destruction, a credit rating that took 76 years to build, a currency that took decades of ordinary people's savings and reduced them to almost nothing. That destruction does not explode on a screen. It accumulates in spreadsheets, in empty hotel rooms, in currency exchange windows, in the gap between what a pension was supposed to be worth and what it actually buys today. Neither economy has collapsed. Both countries retain significant resources, institutional structures, and populations with resilience that should not be underestimated. But the financial trajectory of a prolonged conflict that neither country has formally declared and neither country appears to be able to exit is not a trajectory that improves on its own. Similarity in structure does not establish a predetermined outcome. History offers examples of economies that absorbed enormous military burdens and recovered. It also offers examples of economies that did not. So tell me in the comments, when you look at what $80 million in Iranian missiles and $27 billion in Israeli defense spending are doing to the people who hold neither government's power, who do you think is actually paying the price for this war, and does anyone in either capital have a genuine incentive to stop it?